Welcome everyone to the Perfect Pugilist. This is a Fallout 4 Survival Mode series, and I am your host, Master Katz. So we've got our girl Barbie Benchpress here, and she's currently level 27. In this series, we're not going to be using any weapons of any kind. We will be using armor for a limited period of time, and the only items that I really use are harvestable meat products, stimpaks, and things that will cure radiation. So a few other details worth noting: because this is survival mode, I cannot fast travel, and I can only save when I sleep in a bed. There is the option to save when quitting, but I don't typically take that approach. Also, I will not be using VATs, and I do not use power armor or companions unless they are absolutely required by the storyline and it is completely unavoidable. I will, however, join an NPC on their quest, so Jack Cabot and Paladin Dance would be two good examples there. Quick look at the map. I've been running around in the upper left-hand corner for the most part. Occasionally I dip down to Bunker Hill. More on that later. Early on in the game, running around the area right outside of Sanctuary Hills, there's a lot of low-level animals and bugs that you can fight to gain XP quickly and try to find some decent gear and supplies to get you going. Creatures like the wild mongrel here. You've also got things like bloat flies, blood bugs, and mole rats are everywhere. And of course, I never pass up the opportunity to hunt the local wildlife during a radiation storm. Some of the animals, like the ragstag here, will take off running away from you if you try to attack them or get too close. Chasing them is not always a good idea, especially when that leads you someplace dangerous. Not gonna lie, the blood bugs are disgusting. Ghouls also make an effective way to gain experience points and find low-level loot. Effective crowd control techniques are a must. They come in groups, and they can be difficult to manage. Every now and again you'll run into something that loses its mind. You just have to be a little more careful with how you manage it. While I was in the area working the ghouls over, I decided to stop by the local police station and help Paladin Dance get out of a mess where a bunch of ghouls were attacking him and his group.
We appreciate the assistance, civilian, but what's your business here?
One of the more unexpected encounters of the day were these two softshell mirelurks that sprung up out of the ground by this red rocket truck stop. They are chonky on health and difficult to fight. They can punch hard, although I am wearing armor that kind of protects me, but it's just a very long fight. This actually makes a great opportunity to point out that survival mode has a built-in hidden disease risk pool. And if you do risky things, there's a value that slowly increases with time, and you will occasionally get status ailments like fatigue and weakness, or parasites, or insomnia, and these can be difficult to negotiate, or they just add extra stress to the game. And that's on top of having to maintain things like your hunger and thirst and rest. So there's a lot of extra stacked variables that play into the game and kind of just make life a little more interesting. The next obvious question is, what actions cause the disease risk pool value to increase? Well, things like fighting softshell mirelurks bare-fisted, getting punched a lot, sleeping in beds that are not elevated up off the ground and inside of a structure, drinking water, eating raw meat. There's all kinds of things that contribute to the disease risk pool, and that value quietly builds in the background. I never actually see it until I go to bed, and then I wake up with some kind of new status ailment. Sometimes I'll just be walking around and suddenly I'll just get sick, right? I'll have an illness and that'll slowly drain my HP, and I have to contend with that. So there's a lot of extra elements to the game because of these status ailments, disease risk pool numbers. by the way, I find it absolutely hilarious that if you thump on a soft-shell Mirelurk long enough, it will give up and try to run away. But this one's not going to get away. He's dinner.
You better let me have a look at you. Not many doctors out there on the road.
So I mentioned Bunker Hill earlier, and that's important because there is a medic there who can cure the negative status ailments and get rid of them. In addition to all of the creatures that you may face when you're wandering around the countryside, there's also raiders. These are small groups of people. Usually they're positioned somewhere on the map. They tend to be well armed, and they are highly aggressive. Sometimes the game gets a little extra spicy and it'll spawn a group right outside of wherever you happen to be standing. Apparently I need to practice my timing. Of course, you'll always want to check with your new buddies to see what kind of gear they got. You might find something useful. There are other ways to improve, such as picking up magazines that give you bonuses to things like melee damage and the sneak ability. There is a lot of stuff out there that I'm simply incapable of managing, and sometimes it's just prudent to know when to leave. Other times it's not so obvious if a location is safe for me to venture into and clean out. Take, for example, Hangman's Alley. I met my end here numerous times, and in fact, this location and others, I think I'm just going to keep a running tally in these videos on when I went there and what number trip it was, and until I beat it. Hangman's Alley was one of those where I came back multiple times and made the attempts, and it took me a while to get through it. On the first day, I didn't make any second attempts at locations where I would get defeated. It was more about finding out where I could go and where I couldn't go. Take, for example, this police station near Bunker Hill. I got inside and thought maybe I might have a chance, but no, reality set in pretty quick. So while that first raider went down pretty fast, the second raider is much better armored, and he hits really hard, so I do my best here, but ultimately it becomes a numbers game, and it just doesn't work out. In addition to just randomly discovering where I can and cannot go, there was at least one instance where I selectively chose a location where I knew I was more than likely going to fail, but I wanted to see just what the difference was between my capability and what I would need to actually succeed. And that was the Parkview Station. There's a bunch of triggermen down here, they're a part of a mob, and they are tough, and there's a lot of them. And I figured it would be a good gauge of my progress and just how much more work I was actually going to need. Turns out, quite a bit. Quite a bit. They mocked me. Yeah. Now, occasionally there are opportunities to get up to a little bit of chicanery and tomfoolery, and that involved meeting this guy, who then introduced me to this guy, who then sent me on a quest to go see this woman about some raiders who are in the nearby area causing some trouble. But I'm not here to do any of that. Instead, I'm going to go to Lynn Woods, climb this tower, wait for the raiders to show up, and then activate the siren and call in 2 Deathclaws to deal with those raiders. In the end, it didn't matter because the Deathclaws didn't finish off all the raiders. This one was still hanging out, and arguably so. He's a legendary, he cleans my clock, and that's pretty much where it all ended. Heck of a day. So that pretty much covers the highlights from the first day's broadcast for this series over on Twitch TV. This video is of course posted on YouTube. Be sure to look me up at those locations under Master Cat's Games, and smash those subscribe buttons or follow buttons or whatever they got. Eventually, I might be able to get some subscriptions opened up, and copies of the live broadcast will eventually end up on Patreon as soon as I get that set up. Well, that just about wraps up everything for the first episode, and while we let the credits roll in the background, I just wanted to take this opportunity to say thank you to everybody who stopped by to watch the video. I had a real blast making it, and there will be more to follow soon. I think I may take the next couple of days of broadcast and just kind of smash the highlights together and just try to keep the repetition down to a minimum, because there's a lot to cover, and of course there's some of those places I go back to multiple times, so we'll keep that to as much of a minimum as possible. So until then, thanks for stopping by. Hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye now.